Today, Judge Juan Merchan denied Donald Trump's attempt to have his hush money case dismissed, and he ordered the president-elect to appear for sentencing either in person or virtually on January 10th. That is 10 days before Donald Trump's next inauguration. Merchan also said he will not put Trump in jail. Trump's team called the decision a direct violation of the Supreme Court's ruling on presidential immunity and said this, quote, "There should be no sentencing." Let's turn first to Professor Melissa Murray of NYU Law School. She was a law clerk for Sonia Sotomayor on the federal bench before her nomination to the Supreme Court. All right, Donald Trump might not be going to jail, but this is not the outcome he wanted.
For President Trump to have this conviction entirely vacated, which is what he wanted to have happen. Judge Merchan was always pretty firm that he wasn't going to be yanked around on this. And I thought that the district attorney, Alvin Bragg, made really good points about the sanctity of a jury verdict. The fact that 12 individuals came together and unanimously found that Donald Trump had done these things, that he was guilty on 34 counts. And that verdict, which is bedrock in our legal system, had to stand. So I'm not surprised that Judge Merchan refused the president's arguments here. I think what will be surprising is what comes next, which is likely to be a series of legal challenges at the appellate level.
But what does this mean? Because Merchan wrote that the most viable solution is an unconditional discharge. What does that mean?
So an unconditional discharge in the New York system is essentially that the conviction stands. So we're not vacating the conviction. He is a convicted felon, but we aren't imposing any conditions as a condition of his release. So there isn't going to be incarceration or punishment, a fine, restitution. He's basically just going to be convicted. And that by itself is actually quite significant because he would be the first president in the history of this country to come to the inauguration bearing the label of convicted felon. But again, there wouldn't be any other consequences. And to be very clear, the New York Times did a review of other convictions for these crimes, these fraudulent business crimes, and they haven't found any where there has been an unconditional discharge. There have been conditions placed on other individuals who have been convicted of these same charges, but never anything like this. So this is unusual, and it is the viable option, according to Judge Merchan, because it allows Donald Trump to have the finality and a sentence that will allow him to pursue appellate avenues, but it also preserves the jury's verdict.
Okay, but then forgive me, maybe this is crass. If there's no real consequences, if all it is kind of a stain on his report card, he's down with that. He's got stains all over it.
I'm going to push back on that a little bit, Stephanie. Obviously, it's not the kind of outcome that some people would have wanted. I mean, if you were someone who is in favor of true accountability, this is going to be pretty weak sauce. But for someone like Donald Trump, who cares about his reputation, who did not want to be convicted, this is going to be a pretty big deal. And we've already seen that his spokespeople have made clear that they plan to challenge this. They want to have this conviction ultimately vacated as part of an appellate ruling on this issue. So they're not happy about it. But I do think Judge Merchan was hoping that if there were no conditions, there was no possibility of jail time, maybe Donald Trump would go gently and take this on, and then we could just proceed to what comes next, which is the inauguration of our first felon president.
My goodness, inauguration of our first felon president. Melissa, thank you so much. Evan, I know you want to weigh in here.
Oh, well, I just wanted to cough some more about it, if that was at all possible. No, I'm with you.
It was an unconditional discharge.
That's right. Well, yeah, it's just I'm allergic to, to trade policy conversations. No, I'm with you a bit on this. Back when this trial was going on, I was watching a lot of those focus groups of working class voters that Trump would eventually go on to make big inroads with, right? Mm-hmm. And, Trump likes to think that everybody believes like him that he got railroaded. Yeah. That's not true. These people didn't think that. They think he broke the law. They think he breaks the law. He was convicted of breaking the law. What they thought is they're like, who cares? He's a rich, powerful guy. It's not going to matter anyway. And guess what? It doesn't. And I think for those voters who were expecting not much from the legal system when it came to Trump, I think this is one of those things that will help to convince them that they were right to believe that way.
But even more than that, right? What Donald Trump really excels at being is an impassioned victim. And he says to his supporters, like, life's not fair for you, life's not fair for me. Look what this has done to me. Could he end up flipping the script here and using this as, his next rally cry?
Yeah,
Just
I mean, I'm
political
so glad you
persecution.
said that, because Melissa was talking about, like, oh, Judge Merchan, like, maybe he'll go quietly if we do this. Like, if there's one thing Donald Trump doesn't do, it's like go gently away. That's just not on the agenda.
He loves a fight.
Yeah,
he loves a
totally.
fight. He loves being the aggrieved.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it in an insulting way. Like, look at his history.
It works for him.
I do think there's an irony that needs to explore here, and correct me if I'm wrong, but convicted felons can't vote. But apparently they can hold public office. So I think maybe we need to look at our system a little bit differently and determine whether or not you can, in fact, hold an elected office if you've been convicted of a crime.
Okay, but more than that, right? Right? Like, isn't this the perfect example? Donald Trump, who's all about, restoring law and order, just showed us that he could gum up the legal system long enough, delay, get himself back in the White House and get all this stuff, not this one, but for the most part, all of his legal woes pushed aside with other people even paying his legal bills. What does that say about law and order?
Well, I don't know that he's... I mean, if you look at his history, he's never really been for law and order. I mean, he's avoided $900 billion in tax bills. He has done things that have, other people can't do simply. And so I don't know that that's his real rallying cry. I think instead, as you suggested earlier, victimhood is kind of more his speed.
All right, let's talk about a new topic. On Monday, President Biden and First Lady Jill Biden will travel to New Orleans to meet with families of the victims of the terror attack that took place earlier this week. While this has been going on, Donald Trump, the man who will become president in about 2 weeks, has falsely blamed the attack on President Biden's border policies. And for fact's sake, I'm so glad to be back here tonight to set it straight, at least to those who are watching this program. The suspect was a U.S.-born citizen who served in our armed forces. What is your take on what's happened? I mean, the morning after, right, when we heard all of this, within minutes, the 18-year-old who lives in my house walked in and said it was an illegal immigrant.
Wow.
And I'm going, where is this even coming from? And as soon as that fire is stoked, and as soon as you read that, you can't put it out.
Yeah, I mean, my take is basically immigration has always been Donald Trump's #1 issue. He's like a car that pulls to one side. So anything that happens, there's going to be a way to link it back to immigration, even if it's false. You know what I'm saying? Because if you look at this case, actually, this person was inspired by ISIS, right? If you look at Donald Trump's history in Syria, where ISIS was formed and has been fomented, he tried to pull troops out of Syria, troops that were preventing or trying to prevent the spread of ISIS, right? That's actually an important focus, an important thing moving forward, especially right now, given what's happened in Syria, where there is a chance for ISIS to resurge, right? That is maybe where our focus should be. Instead, we're focusing on this immigration issue because this is what is important to this person and to this politician, because it's good politics for him.
Well, I was going to say, but it's good politics for him, right? Immigration, it's false, but it's been a winning issue for him. It's been a winning argument for him.
Well, so Speaker Johnson came out when he was, after he, won the speakership again today, said that securing the border is the first order of business for the new Congress. What's also interesting is that border crossings over the last several months are below where they were at the end of Donald Trump's first term. So every time this issue comes up and the data refute any notion that we have a border surge going on right now, it just simply doesn't matter. It still comes up as the #1 issue, whether it's Donald Trump or whether it's Speaker Johnson.
Well, because people will say across cities and towns across the country, immigration is a problem to them, whether it's a boogeyman or a reality. What happens, right, if Donald Trump carries out mass deportations, like goes to the limit, does exactly what he says he's going to do, and Americans start to feel the economic pinch, right? Even if they don't feel the human element of it, even if they say we're all about America first, America, 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 what happens when it starts to hit the economy?
Well, we just don't know what that'll actually be like. But I will say this, what we do know what it's like is when you have a guy like Donald Trump who goes from candidate Donald Trump, who said all sorts of crazy stuff, and then became president and started talking about maybe putting bleach inside your body to get rid of COVID, right? Like this whole thing he talked about with this immigrant, and this guy's not an immigrant. immigrant. He's an American citizen. This idea of a military veteran having this slow decline into this whatever madness he declined into to lead him to this place. Obviously, we're not paying attention to that. That could be maybe something to talk about, maybe. But instead, we're going to talk about this immigration stuff, which has nothing to do with this, right? And that's one thing for him to say right now. But in just like a few days, it's the president of the United States who will be saying stuff like this, right? That's the thing that's really important when it comes to this, is that, like, whether he can do his mass deportations or not, whether he can do, a lot of the policies that he wants to do, what he can do is foment this whole world that we lived in once before, where there is no reality, truth is flying all over the place, we don't know what's really going on ever, and the person who's in charge of keeping people safe after things like attacks like this one is the person putting out lies about who did the attack.
Okay, and to that point, we are living in a universe where conspiracy theories are not in the fringe. They're front and center, and people who are already unwell, angry, unhappy can be radicalized. That is supercharged in a world where social media is front and center in everyone's hands.
100%. And what happened in Las Vegas, similar situation, right? It was almost parallel to what transpired, although
not connected, but parallel.
Not connected, but parallel. And what's interesting, again, when you go back to the fact-driven argument around immigration, we have 8 million undocumented workers. We have 33 non-native born workers in the United States. To your point about the economic impact, when you look at agriculture, when you look at construction, when you look at hospitality, when you talk about Americans feeling the pinch, if indeed the incoming president were able to engage in mass deportations of the numbers that he's been talking about, anywhere from 11 to 20 million people, we will notice immediately, both in terms of higher prices, lost ability to get your fruits and vegetables, get your house built, get your roads paved, all of that.
But isn't one of the reasons Donald Trump's sort of anti-immigrant stance has become so popular and taken hold is because we are seeing people in the middle class doing worse than they were years ago, and this feeling that life isn't fair. And when you feel like life isn't fair, a great and easy scapegoat are these other people. And that is a situation that we're in that I don't know if we're going to get out of.
Yeah, I mean, it's also a feeling, though. Do you know what I mean? It's a feeling. Like when you looked at, oh, God, I wish I remembered, but there was consumer confidence data that came out that said, basically, back in November, people were like, economy bad. Same people, 2 months later, economy good. Do you know, people, it's a feeling, it's an emotion, it's not a reality. Now, there are real things happening that are unfair, but so much of what's happening right now is feelings-based. And Donald Trump is good at tapping into it.
He sure is.
You go back to the pandemic, right? So 3 million people retired early. Women left the labor force. Young people were forced out of jobs. So the jobs that were required to be done were made up by non-native workers who filled out the labor force, kept wages down, and kept the economy growing at above trend level of growth. And so, we can cut this a lot of different ways. That feeling that you described, by the way, goes back to the 1840s when the Irish started coming to the United States. So this feeling has persisted about immigration really since the founding of the nation. Yeah.